So we'll call the meeting to order and a roll call. There ought to be a list of us somewhere.
We're missing three.
Thank you. Yeah, really, I know that's right. So Andrew is absent, Kim is absent, Mark Cook.
Here.
Jean-Pierre.
Here.
Stephanie is absent for now. Nick.
Here.
I am here, and Jay Peters is coming a little later. Next item is the approval of meeting minutes from January 7th. We've all received them. I thought they were perfect.
I move to accept the minutes as submitted.
Is it supported?
Second.
Supported by Pierre. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Minutes are accepted. This is the public comment section. Don't think we have anyone in the...
There's no one in the
No?
front here.
Okay. We'll skip that. Under old business, we have the Unified Development Ordinance, UDO, presentation and response and questions from Mark. You want to come sit closer?
Yeah. We can kind of have a conversation this way, so. If you don't mind, Phil, just kind of take these props.
Yeah. Take pictures.
Good, we do like props.
Oh, good. So I believe this group received a presentation, was it Phil, last fall or perhaps last summer, with from Jenna Ellswick and Chris Corey.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris Corey works for McKenna Associates, and he is our consultant on this. And Jenna Ellswick is a senior planner for the city, and she's the primary staff person driving this process. She's out on maternity leave right now, so you get to have a presentation from me. So
Okay.
at any rate, just to kind of bring you a little bit up to speed where we are with this entire process, and I'm not going to start at the beginning because I'm going to assume that you did hear what Chris and Jenna had to say last fall, and so you know why we're doing it, and so forth. So. But we are, I'm going to estimate we're probably 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through this process. It was a process that started a good year and a half ago now. And really kind of the rationale for it again was we completed the city master plan update. The last time we completed the master plan was in March of 2017. So coming up on 3 years now, I can't believe the time is flying by. So. But one of the biggest recommendations coming out of the master plan update is that we completely redo our development related ordinances. Okay, so that's primarily the zoning ordinance, our subdivision ordinance. We got ordinances in the city code that deal with streets and sidewalks. There's also a stormwater ordinance, and that probably is not going to be a part of the UDO, but. So we kind of have all these disparate kind of ordinances, and is a part of an effort to update all of them to get them into today's standards and get more up-to-date best management practices and so forth in them, and to kind of consolidate everything into one ordinance so it can be much more convenient for end users as well as staff ourselves. So, okay, so I'm sure Jen and Chris said, our zoning ordinance is really kind of based on I'm not going to say a Model T platform, but let's say the 40s or 50s. Let's say a Packard. Okay. So, I mean, that's kind of the baseline ordinance. Kind of using that as a metaphor. So it's antiquated. It works. Our zoning ordinance works, but it's time for it to be updated and brought into the 21st century. So we've been working at it a year and a half. Planning Commission has been diligently going through policy papers, and what that kind of really amounted to is we would look at the industrial districts and look at the commercial districts and all the different zone districts that we have in the zoning ordinance. But also looking at one of the the major elements that we have to all this is a new form-based code. And Nick knows this well, but I'll share it with you gentlemen, made just a couple copies. So the form-based code is a completely new element that we're bringing into this. And really, I think one of the primary motives for doing this is to ensure that we get better outcomes. And we're getting the type of development that we really want to get. And we're being much more upfront with developers about what we really want, okay? And so this is an ordinance that really is much more based on illustrations, clearly documenting to people, what do we mean by, wanting to have this type of development or so forth. And so we hope that will really be useful. So we're looking to actually rezone. I got a little map here, but we're actually looking to rezone, so to say, part of the city. And so it's these areas primarily in downtown Holland, but we also have some areas that going down River Avenue here, as well as Michigan Avenue. And we also got some kind of outlying districts. We have the Washington Square neighborhood commercial area, as well as out at the South Shore Village, little neighborhood commercial area there. So those areas, it's intended that they be rezoned, so to say, to a form-based code kind of district. And then each one of those districts then is really kind of talked about more in depth in the body of this report, okay? And so it talks about the uses that are allowed. It talks about the building types that we want, okay? Be it a multifamily building, a mixed-use building, whatever it may be, as well as kind of the best way to put this, whether it's like a, what do I call it? Oh, frontage type, okay? Whether it's like a shop, a shop front, or if it's a lobby type building. So, where you have a larger building, perhaps, and this can maybe be like the Warm Friend, where you walk in and there's, perhaps commercial, retail offices on the ground floor, but you walk into the building and there's lobby space, and then you got, residential above and so forth. So, and there's other types of frontage types that we have illustrated and are proposed in here also. We also talk about street characteristics and really kind of governing the way streets should be perhaps developed if they're going to be up for a redevelopment, and the city does do that on occasion, reconstruct roads, as we all know. So that's probably, with this whole endeavor, this is probably the biggest change that's going to be occurring, and it's probably going to need the most educational effort from us with our stakeholders, be them property owners all along this corridor or whatever, but just realtors and developers. Everybody's going to want to know how does this form-based code thing work? And I think and it's sincerely our hope that once people get a little accustomed to it, they're going to go, oh, well, this really is kind of intuitive. This works easy. And we can understand it. Now we know exactly what you want, city. So that's our sincere hope. So, and then for the rest of the city,
Mark, could I just ask you a question before
Sure.
you get off the form base?
Yeah.
Form base is applicable to downtown. We've got the National Register of Historic District downtown,
Yes.
and we're doing some additional surveying downtown that may identify additional historic resources. Now, we don't have any say over them because they're not locally designated, but
Yeah.
they will be responding to whatever these changes are in the form-based code. The property owners or developers will be.
Yes. So thank you for the good cue for that. So as a part of these ordinance amendments too, so our ordinances right now are pretty much silent on talking about the National Register District downtown, you know, and unless people know about it, you know, or somebody told them, hey, well, you know, that's a National Register District. People simply don't know it, okay? And we had the example of a couple months ago. There was a property owner coming in and going to redevelop or renovate a couple storefronts downtown. And I think maybe the district commission here, you all kind of talked about that a little bit. They were completely unaware
Okay.
that it was in a National Register district. And, you know, so if somebody had bought that property a year or two ago and went through that whole, they simply did not know. Okay, so that's kind of, in a way, that's kind of, you know, bad on us. But you know, so we need to do something to elevate and educate that exists. So what we want to do as a part of the ordinance here then too is basically require, if somebody's going to be coming in and they're going to be doing a renovation or a new building that's in the National Register District, that they're going to be required to come in and have a mandatory meeting with Phil and the senior planner and possibly myself too. So, but for sure Phil in our senior planner, that way hopefully at the get-go, and it's hopefully when somebody is just, you know, thinking about, or perhaps even before they purchase the property and they're kind of scoping out the things they want to do, but we can get to them early, okay, and not trying to be, you know, playing catch-up with them, which happens all so often. So we want to get to them early and just say, listen, you're in the national district here. You know, these are kind of the, you know, the overall goals of the district, and you know, we're certainly, you know, and convey to them, obviously it's kind of an incentive-based program, you know, that nobody's going to compel them to do something, because we can't. It's not a local district, but certainly there are, you know, tax advantages for them to want to do that, and hopefully the state will, you know, improve that this year too, and to make it even doubly beneficial to people. So with that's a big change, I think, you know, just introducing that element into it up front, so people, you know, they're going to be aware of what we're trying to achieve downtown.
Can I just ask, one of the things that we struggle with even in the historic district is people knowing when they're looking at property that it is in the district. And is there anything, you know, you can do these Ottawa County parcel searches and, you know, get all the information about a property. Is there a way to tag them in the GIS system so that it says property on the historic register, click here for more information or something?
I want to say that we have some designation now, or that somehow
I mean, I
there's a
know we've
notation
talked about it, you know,
yeah.
for us, but it just
Yeah.
it just seems like nowadays you'd be able to, you know, have that.
If they go in and do a property search here on
Yeah.
our system, they're looking at permits or what's been taken out on the property. There's a banner that scrolls across saying it's in the historic district.
Yeah.
Call Phil, call them often.
Yeah.
But people would have to go to the city site
Yeah.
and be looking and
Yeah.
do, like Phil said, do a property search and just doing their due diligence on, okay, now what, this property. If they don't do that, they may not necessarily know. And then we always try to, you know, rely on the realtors to be, you know, transparent with that, but we all know
Well,
they don't
when
do
we're
that.
talking about commercial, there are fewer realtors that sell commercial. I think
Right.
probably a dozen or
Yeah.
fewer. I think it's harder with residential.
Yeah. So, but perhaps, I mean, that's a good point, you know, perhaps as a part of this too, you know, we can send out some information to the commercial real estate brokers for sure, and those real estate agents to say, hey, you know, by the way, just letting you know again about the National Register downtown, so.
Yeah. And just to add two things to that, Mallory's waiting for me to cover a couple of points, and then she'll be putting our inventories on our website. So that information will be out there, so you can look up your property and see what the history of the property is and so forth.
That's pretty cool.
And we've had some conversation about getting it tied to the Register of Deeds, so that if you're doing a title search on something, it'll pop up that you're there. So at some point in that purchase process, somebody
Sure.
should be notified. We haven't gotten there yet,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
on the list of
I
things.
didn't mean to sidetrack, it's just
No, no.
something that we have the same issues in our historic
Sure.
district, so it'd be nice to have a similar approach and at least notification.
Yeah. So, the downtown is probably the biggest thing here, but, noticeably too, along River and Michigan Avenue, this is gonna be change for those areas too, and we're really kind of encouraging, more mixed-use buildings, that do have some scale along here, okay? And this is kind of flagged in our master plan, and, it's along a major arterial, so you got mass transit. There's some big employers, down Michigan Avenue. You got Holland Hospital with a couple thousand employees, so, and of course proximity to downtown, but, so at any rate, so we didn't want to just rely on the base underlying zoning, to help people really try to understand what we mean and what we'd like to see happen there. So that's kind of the form-based code. Please take a look at it. If you do have any questions, let me know. I know, your local districts are right smack dab in the middle of our TRN, our residential traditional neighborhood district. And this is a copy of the existing zoning map, and you can see, those districts are crosshatched here. So the Washington Boulevard, the original Couples Village, are all noted on there. The National Register one isn't, because it's not a local district.
The TRN is that lighter yellow.
Yeah, so the TRN is this light yellow area. So within the districts, it's basically all TRN zoning. There is some PRD, Planned Residential Development District, and that's primarily the Midtown Center block, as you well know, and then the Washington School property as that's been redeveloped. And you all were busy, was it 2 or 3 years ago with all those homes? My goodness, that was. So in regards, and then I think there might be a little bit of C1 zoning here or there, perhaps. What is it?
13th and Maple is,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So that's a
Both
little,
stores there.
St. Vincent de Paul and
yeah.
et al.
C1 is a form base too?
It is not. No, that is not. So, really, in a nutshell, the Planning Commission, and this just became evident as of their last UDO study session on the 28th of January. They are not looking to change really the TRN district at all. Okay. So and you've probably been hearing this, there's been a lot of discussion at the Planning Commission, and really a lot of the motivation for it is, what can the city do to potentially allow some additional gentle density, so to say, gentle additional density in some of the established neighborhoods, and not only in the central city area, but also in our R1 districts, which is the whole west side area and south side Maplewood neighborhoods in Holland Heights too. So there's been a lot of discussions about that. We've had neighborhood stakeholder meetings. We had a couple of them back in, I think, November-ish for the TRN zone district. And actually just in January, we had 3 neighborhood meetings dealing with the R1 areas, and we had one out in Holland Heights and one at Jefferson Elementary School and one at West Elementary. So I don't know if the R1 district is really much of any, if you're thinking about that, but the thought process there was, that's just basically a single use zone district. It's single family detached homes, okay? And that's really the only thing that's allowed, other than some, schools, churches, kind of some institutional uses like that are allowed by right in the R1 district too. But the planning commission was interested in, well, is there an appetite, by these neighborhood areas, and perhaps it's maybe one area and not some others, whatever, but is there an appetite for the neighborhoods here to allow some additional density? And we were just specifically looking at two-family possibilities. Jeff, you were at the Jefferson meeting, and I was deathly sick that night, so I wasn't there. So, but so we looked at really kind of containing two families along some arterial streets, be it like 32nd Street or Grascup or Ottawa Avenue or even Central Avenue and so forth. And then looking at some scenarios that just said, well, if it's a larger lot, like almost a half-acre size lot in the R1 area, what do people think about that? So that's kind of more of a dispersal kind of solution. So it wouldn't be keeping people along the corridors. It could be more of a dispersed approach. The reactions in the neighborhood were a little different. Holland Heights was more cautiously optimistic. I think that they basically were saying, and this is all just based on the people who showed up for the meetings too. So I can't say it's a representative sample. I really can't. But Holland Heights, they were saying, we this could perhaps be good for us. We want more details. I think the meeting at Jefferson was probably more in tune with this area here. I think it was a little bit more cautionary. So I wasn't there, but I mean, from what I heard from Mallory was, they didn't say no, but they weren't really saying yes either. The west side was kind of like, yeah, we could potentially get behind this too. We don't like the idea of dupes or two families being allowed by right, but perhaps if the city could have some kind of a review process, a special use permit, something like that, where people could be notified ahead of time, they might be interested in that. In the TRN district, the feedback of that was kind of mixed also. Mm-hmm. I think it would be accurate to say that the majority of the people for both the meetings that we had were interested, at least, in perhaps allowing some additional density. A minority, but kind of a very vocal minority, was saying, "Heck no, city!" They're saying,
"We're too dense already.
We're the densest area of the city. I mean, outside of apartment complexes, but we're the densest part of the city already. You already allow one families, two families, three family, four family. You already allow them by right. Now, granted, you got to have a minimum lot area, which is kind of larger, and that's why we haven't seen more of those kind of housing types coming in. But you already allow for it, so why? Go out to some other areas first. So the Planning Commission, by and large, agreed with that latter kind of thought process. So the Planning Commission right now is really of the notion of they don't want to change the TRN district at all. Okay, so basically, the way the ordinance reads right now is where they're going with it. So, and I know that we have some early additions. Nick, I think you saw maybe perhaps an early edition that said, no duplexes or whatever in the historic district.
Right.
That was stricken out.
Okay.
So that was, yeah. So really, in all honesty, I can report that the Planning Commission is, as of their January 28th meeting, they're not looking to change the base zoning, which includes your local districts at all. That's really kind of the bottom line.
Mark, we have certainly duplexes and fourplexes, I suppose, in the historic district. Did those just pre-exist, or what? And some of them appear to have been built as duplexes.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I would say they're probably a mixture of conforming. You know, originally conforming because they were probably built before zoning even
Okay.
came to the city, which I think was in the 40s.
Okay.
Or maybe it was the 20s, I don't know. But some of those homes, I mean, obviously are very old, so I think they were probably originally built that way. So we're treating them as grandfathered. They
Okay.
are legal, non-conforming buildings, and can continue to do that.
They can be sold and
Oh, yes.
continue to be.
Yep, yep,
And a good part of that was R6, you know, for a long time.
yep,
Was it?
Which is a higher density.
yeah,
And then there started to be conversions, and we got away from that.
yeah.
You know,
And what
Yes.
about those that are converted, where clearly it was a single family and they cut it and created an upper and a lower unit?
Right.
Those again, they don't predate zoning certainly, but.
Right. So probably a number of those, I mean, there were a number of conversions, probably in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So those are all legal.
Okay.
Here again, we treat them all as, we'd have to look at each individual property and do an assessment of it. Is it non-conforming and grandfathered, or is it just allowed by right because it meets all the area requirements, the lot width requirements and all of that, so. But suffice it to say, I mean, I think the vast, unless it's an illegal rental, and you do have those
Could
in the
happen,
city.
sure.
All of the legal, kind of 2-family, 3-family, 4 families that are in here, they are all legal.
Okay.
And, but probably the vast majority of them are non-conforming, but they are legal.
Are they non-conform, when you say they're non-conforming, is that on the basis of their lot size typically? Like those
Yes.
duplexes that are
Yeah.
right there on, I don't know if it's 12th or whatever,
Yeah.
but okay.
Yeah, and some of that happened too. Phil brought up a good point. So back, it's probably 20 years ago or so now, 15 to 20 years, the zoning map, at least in the central neighborhood area here, looked vastly different. So we had a lot of R3, R5, and R6 zoning, which was basically all multifamily zoning. And, and a lot of that was really kind of relics from the urban renewal days yet, where it was just kind of like, oh yeah, it's 60s, 50s, 60s, it's just bulldoze your central neighborhoods because now we want apartments and we want this new stuff. And thank goodness, that didn't take hold. We can see where some of it happened, like down by Rosa Parks Green, there's kind of this apartment complex and you're just like, how did that get in here? But there's some kind of outliers like that happened. But 15 to 20 years ago then, we kind of took the initiative and said, we need to do more to preserve and protect the central neighborhood areas, because this zoning that we have on the books now it's giving the signal that we want wholesale redevelopment, and that is not the case. So we ended up creating this new TRN district and basically rezoning the entire central neighborhood area. But some of those 2 families or 3 families then kind of in that conversion then, they were possibly totally conforming with that R5 or R6 zoning,
they had.
but when we rezoned to this TRN district, I know there was a push to reduce the density allowances. So it's kind of ironic, we're 20 years later, and there was kind of this look at, well, maybe we ought to relax some of the density requirements again. But the planning commission doesn't want to push that now.
I also think I remember that it was trending to pave your front yard for parking, and we, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we kind of
We nipped that too.
snipped that, yeah. But there's a few.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Mark,
So-
this is an aside, but That little apartment complex you're talking about down at Rosa Parks,
Yeah.
that's probably historic. It's probably one of the
Yeah.
first garden apartments
Really?
built in Holland.
So then
Yeah.
reskinned whatever
Yeah.
40, 50 years ago
It could
and
be interesting
where
to see
is
what the
that?
history
That,
of
and
it
we're
is.
having a hard
It's on the
time-
north side of the park,
yeah.
kind of B
18th
block.
20, or
18th Street.
Is it
18th?
18th?
Sure what that street is.
East though, right?
East College.
Yeah, East College, yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, if you
It might be 19th Street.
yeah, down in that area. And there's some other things too. You ride by 'em and you go, how did that get in here?
Sure.
So where are we going from here? So the planning commission will be meeting again just for an UDO session the latter part of this month. And we kind of have some odds and ends that we need to tie up with that. I'm meeting with our consultant actually Thursday of this week, and we're going to be planning out or attempting to plan out kind of the next round of stakeholder meetings and how to engage the community again, you know, and just say, okay, folks, we have a draft ordinance now.
Just for you to,
And so now we're out here to talk about it some more, you know. And as far as this group fitting into the process, you know, I think at this point, if you have any additional questions about things, it might be just appropriate to shoot them to me. Jenna, who is the lead city staff person, she's on maternity leave, and I know her mind is, she's thinking about her newborn child and stuff, so that's great for her. She'll be back on the scene in March, and then kind of take over the reins and stuff with that again. But yeah, so suffice it to say, I mean, we want to make sure that if people got questions, if other boards and commissions of the city have got questions about this, that we answer your questions, and not just answer your questions too. You know, it's like if you got, you know, good constructive ideas, to let us know about them, because we're still at that point that everything is very much just in the draft format yet, so we can tweak things easily.
Mark, two other little areas that have popped up in terms of historically significant areas are the Lawndale, Elmdale Triangle, and Central Park. And I know, I think the Lawndale, Elmdale sort of falls under the same kind of category as the central neighborhoods do, that there aren't changes that will significantly impact those. You do have some changes coming for Central Park though, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, so the little Central Park neighborhood, you all know it, or
sure.
I'm assuming you all know it, out by Central Park grocery store and stuff. So very much a kind of a historic cottage community, you know, that was developed probably in the 19th century. Just a neat little area. And you know, 15, 20 years ago, we saw a movement of people buying some properties and pushing over some of the cottages and putting in some, I don't want to say McMansions, but putting in some homes that were out of scale and out of character with the cottage area. The neighborhood was upset, and they wanted the city to do something about it. Okay, the Central Park Chapel is located in here too, a neat little thing. But even that institution has grown over the years with its programming and so forth, and with it originally just being a Sunday morning go to the chapel, it's now kind of evolved into you know, having weddings there and receptions, and suffice it to say, there's impacts on the neighborhood with that. So all basically, which led to the neighborhood saying, listen,
said, you need to do something about it. So we put some protections, so to say, in there. There's some additional hoops that people need to jump through if they want to build a larger home. But now, in a lot, whenever somebody wants to do something out here, I mean, basically, when somebody wants to turn around, they got to get a special exception or a variance. Recognizing that situation, we're looking to actually create a new zone district out there, and calling it our traditional cottage district. So it's kind of modeled on the traditional residential neighborhood district. But much more smaller lots and so forth. So we hope that that's beneficial to the people out there. But definitely want to have an emphasis of preserving the cottage feel and the urbanity out here before, it just disappears with, how neighborhoods kind of organically evolve over the years. We want to try to retain that. I'm sorry, but I do have to go pick up my son
That's
from,
good. Thank you.
from swim match.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Appreciate the update.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry for the abrupt.
All
I
right.
just looked at my watch and I'm like, oh, I gotta be to my son's school in 2 minutes.
Email for him, but I have a couple of other Udo related. I was wondering if I could just share them with these guys for the
Sure.
record. It can take 2 minutes, but
Sure.
I reviewed the form-based code pretty in-depth recently and had a couple of notes that I think are either pertaining to the district itself or coming from a historic lens, maybe pertaining to either the national district downtown or just the city in general. One is that the code in the section 3.16, which deals with encroachments, allows for a cornice of up to 2 feet in depth. And I'm a little bit worried that that's not enough for a building that's really large. The cornice might want to scale up to be in proportion with a larger building. So I don't think we necessarily have, I don't know if we really want a number in there like that. It maybe there's a larger number or maybe there's no number at all. The second one is they classified the building typologies into these lobby buildings or commercial shop fronts, etc. And one of the buildings that's typical in downtown is bank branches, which exist among shop front buildings but don't have the same transparency in their character as shop fronts. So the Fifth Third Bank has a different transparency at pedestrian level, as well as the bank on the corner of Central and 8th. And I'm concerned that the form-based code actually specifies that only the shop frontage typology is allowed adjacent to 8th Street, which requires up to a 60% transparency. And so in theory, these buildings would be non-conforming, which is fine, but if we ever wanted to build another bank branch, those typologies, those frontage typologies would be off limits, which I don't think is really the intention. The intention of the transparency is to have an enhanced pedestrian environment and eyes on the street and so on, but it's okay to have speckled in some other kinds of frontages which are just as appealing and just as in keeping with our historic DNA. And so I think a remedy for that they might consider is to put bank branches into the landmark typology rather than the just commercial typology. It's a little bit counterintuitive, and it may even have some political issues with as that goes through the planning commission and everybody involved. But I just think if they look at the bank branches, they don't have transparency, and it's for good reason. Mm-hmm. The Centennial District here doesn't wrap all the way around the park, and I think we could maybe explore this at another time, or maybe with planning staff or whatever, but it really ought to. The spirit of the intent of Centennial being something different than Central Downtown in terms of its form, I think really is partially informed by Central Avenue Reformed Church and its dependent buildings, and as well as the Women's Literary Club. And for those to be for some reason left out of this character zone doesn't really make any sense, especially when Hope Church is part of this character zone and it's not even on the park.
Mhm.
So I think, and I brought this up to them before, but now I get to put it on the record to say they should revisit that. There's that little appendage to Central Avenue Reform, which could very plausibly be redeveloped at some point, and I think those forms ought to come from the Centennial context, not necessarily the central downtown context. I think the other ones are a little bit more technical than we need to go, so I'll just throw them into an email, but those are the ones I wanted to run up the flagpole at this point.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And- But where does the Centennial Inn fall in that, or do we think that's gonna leave
It's a great
change
question.
uses? I mean, it's
What they
certainly on
did, what they did was they didn't wrap it all the way around to the residences because
Sure.
those are part of TRN and that's kind of a different deal. But one of the really defining aspects of Centennial Park is that it actually blends residential with monumental.
Mhm.
If you just kind of pan across the park, it's this whole transition. So it's, to me, it makes more sense for that to stay TRN over there
Okay.
because it's just houses, and Centennial Inn's a good example of kind of both. But
Sure.
the church is monumental.
Sure.
And it's, I know it's allowed by right in the central downtown district, which may be why they don't really care to put it into the Centennial Zone, but the whole point of the Centennial Zone is to have sort of an elevated civic presence,
Mhm.
which includes churches, and they're obviously including Hope Church for some reason, so.
Mhm. Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
John, I would suggest we jump down to new business.
Let's do that. The first item is a certificate of appropriateness application for demolition of an existing garage, construction of a new garage, and replacement of vinyl siding on entire house, 75 West 12th Street. Jeff?
You want to give us a summary of what you're proposing?
Yeah, the house that is right down the street, obviously. It was cited, I think, 40 years ago. I think I sent a picture of that siding to you. It's wood grain vinyl. And it's 4-inch, it's not true historical. Usually the historical is about 2 3/4 as far as the lap goes. I gave a sample, I think, did you have a sample of what I was
What you're
looking at?
proposing?
A smooth face vinyl, which is the 2 3/4, which is more historical. That's the same kind of siding we used on Knooster's house, the same vinyl, which is actually, I think we have a picture of, that's the garage. That was one of the garages I was kind of looking at as far as the look of. But then I sent in another one, another picture of B. Is there a B? I gave it to, I think Mallory had it. It was just a sketching. It was like a
Yeah,
little-
you gave, let's see, let me find it.
I'm thinking I'm more apt to go with that second design than this on the screen there.
I think the packet just had the two
Yeah.
garage
This
photos.
came in a little later. Nick, what's this? Sorry, I'm bouncing around. I don't see our report packet in here, so I'm sort of scouting for images. So that's the existing.
Yeah, that was built in 1967, 66.
And the proposal ultimately is a 24 by 24.
Yeah, then this
Footprint.
picture, I'm sorry, there's no dimensions on it, but it's 24 by 24. And then this garage is out of code, it's encroaching on the neighbor to the east, so you can touch the garages with your hands.
Mhm.
And the proposal for me would be to move it 5 feet to the west,
West.
from where it sits now. And this garage, the the plate is rotting in the inside, and all the concrete's like buckled up, and it's just pretty bad. And it's not historic, right? I guess. Well, maybe it is. 1969 might be historic.
Well, the reality is that's sort of the conclusion the commission needs to come to, is identify if it's historically significant
Yeah.
and they want to allow it to be demolished, then it's a notice to proceed. If it's not significant, it can be a certificate of appropriateness as part of the new construction as well.
Is it historically significant?
You won't hear that from me. I don't know.
How do the members feel?
Is it historically significant? I'm asking, is it?
We're working on it.
What is the vintage of the house? It's 20s, right? Or even pre-20s?
Oh, no, it's old.
It's like,
Yeah, I want to say it's like turn of the century.
okay.
Yeah, it's probably.
So it's not as if there's a
1900s.
1960s house that matches the garage or anything like that.
I know that's that's the side photo that you can see wood grain in there and the vinyl. Maybe you can't see it very well, but
No, it's.
that's why I was proposing smooth to make it look like wood. Because even if I paint that, it's still going to be wood grain effect.
And it's oxidized.
Yeah, and it's chalking up because it's so old. The vinyl is chalking. And so, and so is the aluminum, for that matter.
If you remember, I don't know if it was last month or 2 months ago, we had the conversation about siding and replacing siding. And under the interpretation that I offered in looking at our ordinance, you can repair siding. That's what the ordinance permits, and you could repair it in kind to make it match what's existing. That's not a problem doing. But the question came when you're repairing wholesale, the whole building, is it a repair or is it a change in, because a repair is automatically allowed, but a change in material is not automatically allowed, so it requires a certificate to come to that conclusion.
Question?
Yep.
I know that we, every project is, off on its own merit, right? And you and I have talked about this before, but the house that is on the historic portfolio was done 6 years ago, I think, and that is all vinyl. And it's actually advertised by the Historical Commission as a historical home. And that was basically what I'm asking for, is the same scenario as that house.
So you're saying that the city is using a vinyl sided home to
promote this.
okay.
I mean, I don't know if that's an accident, but obviously, it doesn't what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't look like vinyl siding. Obviously, to take a picture of it and put it on a head sheet or a cover of representing the historical district.
And does anyone here feel that that's in part, at least because the corner boards are, whatever they are, wood, as opposed to that hollow L-shaped piece? It's got a name, I forgot.
The J channel?
Not the J channel, but the one that,
yeah.
that fits.
I'm kind of
Help me understand, what are the corner boards on that house?
They're aluminum.
Huh?
They've been wrapped in aluminum. Yeah. Oh, on Canuster Street?
Yeah, I think.
Oh, no, that's
right.
PVC product. That's a PVC.
So on the home.
But it's not the
that
hollow.
the city markets as a historic home, what is the material on the home that the city markets as a historic home?
That is a PVC product.
That's PVC.
Yeah.
On Holland's own literature?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's how old?
And that's smooth. It looks like it's painted. That's 6 years old.
Okay.
So that replaces what would have been a solid wood thing with solid vinyl thing, or PVC? Or is it wrapping around?
No,
It's not wrapping
No, it's not
anything.
wrapped. It actually looks like wood.
So it's really like replacing whatever the corner piece of
Yeah.
wood was with a
Yeah,
corner piece of
exactly.
PVC,
And it has
which
some
allows
thickness
then, I
to it.
think,
It's an inch
Not-
thick.
Inch thick,
Yeah.
okay.
But it's what it probably allows it to look more like a wood
Agreed.
siding
Okay.
instead of
Mhm.
something that's bulkier wrapped. I mean,
But we're talking about a house that we don't know about that isn't this house, right?
At
We're
the
talking
moment,
about the one
yes.
that's in the literature.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Can I ask a question?
certainly.
What is historically significant about a vinyl-sided home in 1973?
If it's built in 1973?
No, it was built in the 1800s and it was sided in the 70s. What is historic about the covering of the 70s, which is now oxidizing?
Anybody want that? I don't think we're making a case for the current vinyl siding. I don't think that's the point.
So we're talking about 75 West 12. Can we replace the existing siding which was put on in the 70s and is now oxidizing with a more historically aesthetic vinyl? No.
Well, I think that's the question before us. Would we
That's
accept?
different than the garage question.
Exactly.
Yes, it's a separate question, I think.
I think maybe there's another aspect to it. I'm not arguing for this, but
Mhm.
if you're going to the expense of replacing that siding again, not knowing what the condition of the siding is underneath, once that siding comes off, then there's a question of, is it still the best solution to go with a new vinyl siding, or is it fairly intact underneath?
I guess
So
that's
it's-
the $1,000,000 question, right?
Yeah.
No,
Because there's
Well,
a hundred, there's a,
yeah.
there's 1,000 holes in it for sure, right, from nailing
Yeah.
the vinyl on it.
And maybe trim
And maybe,
removed.
why did they do it? Maybe they had all sorts of problems, with the siding
Yeah.
too, so.
Speculative.
Yeah, obviously, that's the question.
Yeah, I think John just said it. I don't think the issue is, let's save that green vinyl siding.
Yeah. Yeah.
I took the vinyl off of the house and we kind of peeled it back and peeked. We kept looking and looking to see
Yeah.
and it turned out the wood was not in terrible condition. The assumption we all made was that they must have put vinyl on because the wood was shot, but as it turned out, it wasn't true.
They just had good vinyl siding salespeople in those days.
I would think. Well, and then the vinyl protected the wood for 40 years or however long it was, so that was our experience, but it wouldn't be everybody's. I admit we were a little surprised when we found the wood was usable. Not perfect, but usable. Okay.
John, maybe I could just run through these sort of in order and make sure we're covering everything.
Please.
The first is the demolition of the existing garage. And we talked about that to some detail. Then the construction of the new garage.
Mhm.
And the sketch is probably the
I
most
think it would
current
be better,
example.
I think it would look better, that sketch,
Okay.
with this house.
And presumably, I think you've said to me that would be the same siding as whatever the house ends up being.
Yes, I'd like to match if we're
Yeah.
gonna do it.
The roof pitch, the house is a,
It'll be a
Hip
12-12, it'll not to exceed 22 feet in height. That's kind of that's what mine is, my garage.
And what's the top of the garage? Is that a loft, the space, or
You could call it storage, you could
Storage.
call it,
it's not intended as an ADU? Or
I think you're allowed to have that space. I don't think we can determine, it's not a sleeping quarters, but maybe that could be some days, somebody could ask for that, I know you can put offices above a garage. This one right here, that green, well, there's that picture right there. Well, that's the house that you guys have on your historical register right there.
And Jeff, you're saying that this piece, the white,
Yeah, that's
is
the PVC.
like a 1x6?
Yeah.
But it is.
I'm really sorry I didn't bring a piece of that, 'cause I had some
Okay.
at home, but
AZAC or?
Yeah, it's
like
well,
that?
this is Versatech, AZAC, or name brands,
I
but
understand.
what they are is they're like, PVC is like a stable, product, it doesn't expand and contract.
Right, and with quite a thickness to
It's
it,
a
as
little-
opposed
yes,
to
thick. Well, they
the
plumbing pipes are-
inexpensive kind of L-shaped piece that's about 4 inches on the side and is hollow.
Mhm,
And
right.
one can
Yeah,
push
yeah,
on
that's
it
right.
and.
Yeah, that's a whole different animal right there, yeah.
There is a J channel in between the ends of this, the
Yeah, you
lab.
still have to slide, you still need a J.
Then there's a J just inside of it, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So can we change
What?
our literature so that we don't ever have this issue again? Because I don't think we should be promoting J channels if we can avoid it. It seems like a small issue, but I actually,
Well, you are. It's all over. You're promoting that.
Yeah, we shouldn't have, in fact, we talked about it, Phil and I talked, that shouldn't be on the,
You're, you're promoting it and celebrating it.
yeah, when you do that, yeah, exactly.
We'll get into design guidelines
Okay.
shortly.
Mhm. So I think keeping them in order, the first question is whether to determine that the garage has significance. And I think I'd like to hear how all of you feel.
Can we put a picture of it up again?
If I can find it. Let's see if it's.
Yeah, there. That's pretty good.
The bottom section of the garage door is rotting too.
Sure. And, okay. And is that siding what's called Dutch lap? With
Yeah.
sort of a.
Yeah, Dutch like
Okay.
that. That is actually wood.
Mhm. So the siding on the garage doesn't match the house, other than sort of kind of the color.
Not even.
Not,
If you're
okay.
talking Pantone gradients, it's not even close.
Okay.
within preservation in general, some people would say that, yes, that's absolutely historically significant. I personally think that the district needs to be careful about bringing in all these mid-century pieces into contributing, so I would say probably not. But I do know that there's a pretty large camp of people who think it is.
Mhm.
Do you remember when you were growing up, a lot of people put their basketball hoops on the garage?
Mhm.
That's the classic right there. There's a piece of plywood on the garage top where the basketball hoop used to be.
Rotted out.
And it's all rotted, yeah. It's dripping into the garage.
It actually fell off
Yeah.
when I removed it.
Yeah.
Well, my take on it is that it doesn't match the house in conformity or age or. So would our first step be to determine whether, you said, Phil, that if we determine that it isn't historically significant, then we don't need to give permission to tear it down?
But we still need to, but it's a simple
Okay, it's an
certificate of
obvious,
appropriateness, or
okay.
part of a certificate.
So would anyone like to make a motion to allow the garage to be removed and declare it, what's the best way to put that? Not historically significant. If I weren't the chair, I would make such a motion.
I'll make a motion to, do I need these, right? Or is these gonna come when the garage gets?
I think we'll get to those.
Okay. Yeah, I would make a motion to say that this doesn't require a notice to proceed, but it's not contributing, so it could be removed as a larger garage replacement project.
Is there support?
I second.
Mark. Any other discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's everyone. The next then is the construction of a new garage based on the sketch we just got tonight. Did you say, Jeff, that the footprint is a little bigger or not?
Sorry?
Is it roughly the same footprint but moved over? Is
This
that-
one's 22 by
Okay.
22. So I'm asking for a couple extra, but I have to push it away from the other property line now because of the way the codes are, right?
Mhm.
So it's non-conforming right now,
Mhm.
as it sits.
And none of the slab is usable? You can't?
No, it's really bad. Plus now, when we have, remember we have to dig an ankle frost wall
Frost,
in now
yeah.
too, so.
Okay. Well, so you don't want it to heave up like the other?
Yeah, and that's exactly what it's doing.
Are there any other considerations in terms of the new garage that, I mean, I think we have a pretty good view of what it looks like. Whatever we later determine about the siding would apply to the garage as well,
Can we look at the house, the front of the house again?
please.
We used to, as a commission, really look closely at the house when we were looking at the garage. I don't know if we still are in the habit of doing that or not, but I remember a couple of years ago that was like a big.
I don't know if there's an overall view of the house, is there?
That was it, yeah.
That was the house, but it wasn't real, it doesn't show any of the,
Just flipping a corner of it.
yeah, you had a staff picture, I thought, of the house.
Mm,
Yeah, that's
a
it,
little
yeah.
What's
Better.
the address, 75?
75 west.
Are these casement windows across the front of that upper?
Those are cottage style double hungs.
What is the street? Oh, 12.
12, yeah.
Mark,
On
the
the-
whole house has aluminum storms on it, so it's kind of deceiving.
Okay.
But those are just plain double hung windows, aren't they? They don't have like cross sections in them.
Yeah, there's no grill pattern.
Yeah.
And what about the third floor? That looks like a solid
It's like a
window?
picture
or
window, yeah.
Just solid,
Just
no panes.
one single?
There's no panes.
So I took this picture particularly with the replacing of the siding notion, just to wonder about what you're doing in the
Yeah,
dormers.
I don't think that should be bevel up there. Like if you go back to Canuster's house, that's cedar shake, a vinyl cedar shake, a heavy shake though it's not like it's like a more of a PVC shake.
Mhm.
I think those should be shakes. I'm sure they were original shakes at one time there.
Is that something that would have been covered up with the vinyl, that you'd
Yeah.
actually see it?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that's a good question. It's so high up there.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
but it doesn't. To me, it doesn't look right with a bevel up there.
There's some historical gables on Hope's campus that do. I was just looking at
Yeah.
the bevel siding today. They have them in there, but
Yeah.
in my mind, you can do shake or that, and
Yeah.
it's within reason.
Yeah.
It's very
I
appropriate.
mean, there's not a lot there of siding on all those dormers, but I'd say the majority of the historical, if you look, there's probably more cedar shakes in the
Yeah.
gables than there.
I think so too.
Yep. So I kind of got my question answered by looking here, and I don't think that the garage elevation is going to really steal the thunder of the house. The driveway is just so narrow that it doesn't seem to be a huge issue. I see the basketball hoop you're talking about as well.
Can you turn it a little bit?
Yeah.
I know it's your computer, but
Um,
sure.
you know,
Okay.
you're going to have this big bank of looks like double hungs or casements up in that
Mhm.
saddlebag dormer there. That's you know, that's a lot of cost and sort of a nice composition for a garage. It used to be when we would look at garages, we wanted to sort of play them down so that they would
Yeah.
be a little bit quieter. But the only recommendation or thought that I have, it's not
Yeah,
really a recommendation,
sure.
but just could you imagine that door is actually two doors with a center?
You know, I would vote against that just because of it's too hard to get in and out with our cars now, right? Our cars are huge to be able to turn in and out with that centerpiece in there. And like all the garages that I've been building in the historical district have had an 18-foot garage door. Now, obviously, there's a lot of garages that don't have that. I'm just saying, preferably, if you were buying a house or living in a house, you wouldn't want that centerpiece in there.
Yeah, but you're in the historical district and your reasoning is modern cars, right? And so,
Yeah.
you know, if you're buying a house and you're buying in a certain area,
My Model T is only
presumably,
5 feet wide, so I have
Yeah.
no trouble.
presumably you're buying for character as
Yeah.
well. And one of the things that the center post gives you is a little bit more of a sense of verticality with those two bays. It's really quite a modern thing to have this really long header and this really horizontal opening of a big garage door.
Yeah.
So that's where that comes from, but it's not I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's
It's
required.
not a structural center there, it's a visual only.
Could be visual, could be a
If
structural,
you
could be
go
both.
back to the Greens house, the first garage, and that'll give you an idea of just that was a fiberglass wood door, which looks really nice.
You got those two just down the street.
No, that's green right there. That's green. That's the, to me, looks, I understand where you're going with that, Nick.
Yeah.
I get it, believe me. But I think this really, to me, looks very historical too, also. It kind of has a wood grain effect. Yep.
So you're building garages all over town, so I'm gonna make my plug here, and then you can do whatever you need to do, but it's just my 2 cents from a.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I have some empathy for you because we have about this much clearance to get over Jeep in my garage.
Your mirrors, put your mirrors in when you go in.
Type them, yeah.
Anything else on the new garage?
What about, oh, gosh, this is the center. There's one across the street, Nick?
Is there?
70.
That's,
70.
that's slides, yeah.
Slides.
There's no center there's no center.
Well, and that's why I kind of phrase it as, could you imagine a center? I'm not saying that I'm
Yeah.
not gonna vote for it if there's no center, but it's just a consideration. I mean, right now is the time to have those considerations, right? Because you haven't done the project yet, so.
And the one it abuts right next door at Alice's, which is absolutely non-conforming and non-historic. It'll bring that one up.
You know, and obviously maybe this isn't fairly relevant, but I think it enhances the neighborhood. A beautiful garage. I look what we tore down at Greens and what we tore down at our house. I think it enhances the neighborhood personally. You know? I mean, I don't know what else. I don't see really anything negative there. If it's a non-conforming or it's not unusable or it's failing, structurally failing, I don't have a real issue with making a nice looking building in the backyard. Remember, it's the backyard too.
Yeah, I think we agree. I mean, this is a good project and it is an enhancement. Or I agree, I don't know why I'm saying we, but.
Yeah, no, I see it. So is there a motion to approve the construction of the new garage? And I guess we should use our reference to standards. I would think standard 9, new additions, exterior alterations, and related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, or spatial relationships. The new work will be differentiated from the old. Anyway, I'm not making a motion, I'm just,
No, I move to approve the application for the certificate of appropriateness as submitted per testimony for 75 West 12th Street for construction of the proposed garage, and based on local guidelines for Secretary of Interior Standard Number 9, No additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property, and the new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment.
Thank you, Mark. Is there support?
I'll second that.
Pierre?
Yes.
Any other discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried. The third item then is replacement of vinyl siding on the entire house with the provision that the new profile is what we're looking at here. I don't know if it's up to us to I think we've talked about the L-shaped corner board that is not being proposed, so I don't know that we need to discuss it. Does anyone have any more thoughts on it?
So the corners would be the PVC stuff, or?
Yeah.
Solid.
I think
Solid
that'd be
product.
important, Mark. I think that looks more historical than these kind of corners around there now.
Right, that's what I meant, the hollow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And often, it seems like a vehicle hits it and then it
Yeah.
shatters in pieces. You know.
Exactly.
Get that
I
a lot
sent
of
you a
12th Street
picture.
people driving to your house.
Well, yeah, that's right, bicyclists mostly. I think I sent you a picture of
Yeah,
one that,
yeah.
you know, really struck me, and I don't, it's also not easy to replace, because the nails are hidden, right? So, it really was an inexpensive product, but not a very effective one, I think.
So I don't
Would-
think that the 1970s siding is historic, and I'll just get
Yeah.
that on the record,
Yeah.
Okay.
FYI.
Sure.
I don't know how a commission like this says, well, what if it was really nice wood underneath, and we don't know, and we can't
Mhm.
even do a site, we're not gonna do a site visit to pull back siding and look,
Mhm.
I don't think either.
Well, and I'm wanting to admit out loud that we did it very gingerly, and we kept thinking, should we put it back down and not rock any boats and just leave the vinyl that we had? But I'm long-term glad that we peeled it, and I'm glad that we found that the wood wasn't terrible. It's not perfect, but it's, you know, in the end, I'm glad to have the wood. Ask me again in the spring when I do my every second year painting.
I think from a historical standpoint, it would be really awesome if you pulled off that gross vinyl siding and then did either wood or reclaim the wood, and then someday your house is on our literature
Brochure
instead of this
instead
other
of-
one, but
yeah.
I don't know how we can speculate on
Right.
the ifs,
Yeah, we don't.
the what ifs. So I would just say we should just like go with the vinyl siding replacement like for like.
Can I say something? I worked for 10 years in the plastics industry. As soon as a plastic oxidizes or blooms, it's beyond degrading. When you put your hand on the siding, you come up with chalk. It's beyond degrading.
So is your point that vinyl siding doesn't last forever just like wood siding?
My point is the vinyl siding that was added in the 70s is done, and it's time to fix it.
And that the siding we're proposing now will be better in some way, or just that
They've
it's...
changed the way,
Certainly.
yeah, it's like,
Certainly.
you know, as far as the UV rays, you know, on it. This was like the first
The
vinyl siding.
ultraviolet strength
Yeah.
that is injected in the plastic now is stronger than was injected in the 1970s.
And that's why we go with darker colors now, because they don't fade.
Ah.
Like if you look at a lot of houses with vinyl, and they have, now they don't, they're dark now, which was, was very unusual, because they'd always fade right out, you know.
Okay.
I think I've said enough.
Is there a motion then to approve the, as presented, the new siding, replacement of vinyl siding with newer vinyl siding?
Would that be under the number 9 as well? I'm not sure how, I agree that to me it doesn't make a difference that going from one vinyl siding to a newer, nicer vinyl siding is a good idea actually, but I don't know how, like, where we approve of it. I think number 9 works.
I think number 9 is the applicable
Mhm.
standard.
Yeah, I think so too. While I'm waiting to hear that motion, if you were to take the vinyl off or start to take it off and you found that the wood was in good condition, was that something you'd consider, or are you pretty bound and determined to go ahead with vinyl?
I would, but I would like to be the one that makes the decision,
Absolutely,
not the board.
and it shouldn't,
And listen, my house is all wood, every speck of it, windows, everything, and it's all completely brand new. So I'm a historical person. This is just a little bit different. I really would like to be able to, if it looks like I can paint it and look great, I'm all for it. But I'd rather have the ability to, and I'm not trying to snow you or anything either.
No,
If it looks like to me that I can paint it, especially if everything looks intact, and I can have Roca paint it and it'll look beautiful. Okay, but I'd really like to have the decision.
That's your, yeah.
Need to make the decision
Okay.
on that. Okay.
That's kind of what I was saying too, is like we can't really go that
Oh,
far with
yeah.
it, so.
Yeah.
How would we know?
Yeah.
Yeah, without tearing it apart.
So we're clear that if that happens, they don't need any permission from us, that's,
I don't know how we say, well, if you do this, then you find this and come back. I think it's just like
Yeah.
we have to,
Well, we'll keep it, we'll have something in the approval that refers to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to disappoint you if I made the final decision to put vinyl on
I-
it, you know, right?
no, I think that's,
Okay.
the next step is to approve the vinyl with the understanding that you don't, or somebody
We're
correct me on
not
this.
forcing you to put vinyl back on if you don't.
we're not gonna stand
If
there
you
and
like
watch
the,
and see if it,
Yeah.
for a couple of days turns into a wood-sided house that now is,
Right.
but if it does, it'd be nice, right?
Mhm. Okay, that makes sense.
Pierre, are you thinking about a motion? here?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve this under state guidelines, city guidelines, number 9. New additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, and special relationships that characterize the property. The new work will be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with the historic materials, features, size, scale, and proportion, and massing to protect the integrity of the property and its environment.
Thank you, Pierre. Is there a support?
I'll support.
Any more discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
Can I make a post comment?
You may.
In 2010, we resided 85 West 12th Street. The laborers who pulled off the aluminum came to me and said, the clapboard on your home was hand done in the late 18s. There is no uniformity here. We've measured 4 sides of your home times how many floors. We're coming up with an average. We're going to hand nail each board with this average because the gentleman who built your home in the late 18s just put it up. Is it okay with you, Valerie? We take the average, not a uniform, but the average of what was found around your home and tap it in there. And I said, beautiful. And so what we're proposing at 75 is the same, an aesthetic to get to the original. And there's no science, there's an art behind it. That's my only comment.
You understand that we just approved the change that you asked for. Did you want it?
I wanted a
Is
comment
something
added
else?
saying, Jeff Burke is gonna make sure it looks good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I get that in blood, Jeff?
Yeah, really.
So we
I
still
live
have-
here, my friends, I live here. It's gonna happen.
And we still have the egress window and the railings, is that right?
Yes. Thank you. Next item is, I'm sorry.
Do we have a railing and a window real quick? I can show you some
Can I ask
things
you a
here.
question? Are we gonna have a quorum for the next item, or is that gonna have to get tabled?
No, there's no action on it.
Okay, so there can be still a
Yeah, it wasn't
discussion.
an
Okay.
application.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a public
Yeah.
meeting, Zach. Thanks.
So
Sure.
that would be a railing profile, and this is like a PVC window for the egress window. And it would be a casement. It would be, I guess 30, at least 36 wide, probably, it'd be like 4.5 feet tall probably. And that's in that window well area.
Mhm.
And these are approved. I just put a couple of these in on 13th Street. They're a different color, but there's a picture of it. I think we saw that, right?
I did not.
Where,
There's a,
of the
on there, there's
well?
a picture
Of
of
the-
the window well.
Yeah.
With this kind of window, the same window. Yeah, there it is. So that window right
Oh,
there
I
is
see, it's
this window.
sideways.
Is this window basically?
oh, sure, sure.
It's
Thank you.
sideways, right? The
Yeah.
picture?
Yeah,
Yeah,
got it.
okay.
And it's a, it's a fiberglass window, that, and so is this fiberglass. And the reason being, obviously, the wood ones have had really problems putting them down that low. That pit fills up with snow and it just rests on there and stuff, so.
Hmm.
So that's just one thought, okay? And then here's a top railing that's pretty nice, it looks just like wood. You know, that would cap, all the spindles. I'm not looking for something that's just, I just want a simple. So, the back porch steps, they're screwed on the side, right? The spindles are. So that's like 80s, that was done all the time. We'll see if we can see the back porch. Yeah, those are, see, they're on the side of the handrail. They just
Oh.
kind of screwed in, so we won't do that. We'll make a newel post, and this will sit down on top. And the actual newels go right in there. This is not a wood product, so just take a look at that as far as, but you don't know it's not wood, really.
Pass this around.
Let's fling it across.
How does the bottom rail work on that?
It's
then?
similar to that one. Obviously, it's a lot thinner. It doesn't look as big.
Yeah,
Thickness.
right.
Oh, thanks, attached up underneath.
Yeah, what's nice about it, it's,
We're out of town on that rail.
it does, the water goes through it, but you don't know it, right? You don't see it.
Oh, I suppose.
So I think Grace would have said, well, you need to approve the demolition of this thing before you rebuild it, and it's he's saying that it's from the 80s, so it's not
Sure.
historic, this railing.
And,
And it's the front rail as well that we're talking
Oh, we're
right,
talking about the front rail too?
as well.
It's pretty real plain, you know, kind of.
And you're not gonna reconfigure the porch so it's back the way it was at the original? Because I've got
You know,
that
if
funky
I
little.
saw a picture of it, I would. You know,
Yeah, I
if saw
mean,
original.
it's probably just looks like that porch extended because it's weird how they took off part of the porch
Yeah.
and then
Yeah,
have
you know,
that
if you look
approach.
at that, that's really high, really tall.
Mhm.
It doesn't look proportional, it's not right. You know, that, the newer homes, so the older homes, the railings were like 28 to 30,
mhm.
you know, and this is obviously, you know, per code is probably 36 to maybe even more. I didn't measure it, so. But it looks like a cage in front of the house.
Have you had that conversation with the folks over here in terms of getting the lower height?
Well,
Getting
I
the
did Brandon
exception for
Clay's
that?
house, right? We redid the whole front porch, tore the whole thing
Yeah.
off the house, and that, we kept it all original, that was all the original. And those were like, you know, 20, those were like probably 28, and that's improved by code now as far as going in with the new codes, right? Because it's historical.
Yeah.
And Jeff, what are the spindles now? Are they just?
They're just 2x2.
2x2s?
Yeah,
Okay.
2x2 treated painted.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's all treated,
Mhm.
but it's just been painted.
Yeah, they got
you know,
painted,
so.
okay.
So would you be replacing it with 2x2s or more turn spindles or?
You know, Mark, that's a good question. I think the simplicity is probably the best with just square. I don't, if I could see a picture of, you know, if it had a different style, I'd be more than happy to
There
do
is
that.
no
Yeah, I just
picture
was
of it.
curious what.
I really want it to go
No,
nothing
away,
closer.
you know, as far as
Okay.
the feel of it
Nothing
on the
that I've
house.
seen.
You know, not accent the house, I don't think, you know?
What about that ancient page?
So is this railing just kaput, I mean,
No.
deteriorated?
Yeah,
or-
Totally different rail.
And that
It is.
wouldn't be correct, the X's?
It might be, but it might not be code compliant because of the 4-inch.
That's right. 4-inch ball.
Mhm. I mean, that's the problem. This was taken in probably.
Got a real old picture, but
80s.
it appears to be kind of a cross buck.
Is
Oh,
that,
yeah.
of this house?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
But I don't know if
See
the
it?
new historical laws say that you can do that if you want it to
Not
be.
just-
Does it have
No.
a year on it?
It was,
Oh yeah, it has the old style.
But yeah,
You know, that
Probably could
But it
be
wouldn't
original.
serve
it
it was
improves at that
1980.
original.
so it's a 1980.
Oh, no, that's
Oh.
not, yeah, okay, yeah,
Who
so.
knows?
Who knows though,
Could
yeah.
be.
Those are too notorious for rotting because of the water would kind of slide down and
You know,
just, yeah, you know.
Yeah, sure.
You know, they didn't have stainless steel nails back then, you know.
And that 4-inch ball would go through it almost anywhere. so. Oh, you've got it?
Yeah. Yeah, that was probably taken, in the 70s when we were doing the, because already that section has been dropped off the porch,
Mhm.
the part on the right. Because you can see that's like a 50s style brick at the facing of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what that whole porch looks like. It
So-
was funky.
These posts seem to go all the way to the driveway, or?
Yeah, that's because they've taken off half the porch.
Okay.
And there are now stairs here at the midpoint going up.
Okay.
And the bottom part has a 1950s kind of low stone
Okay.
facing, so you almost walk in at ground level and then you climb the stairs to the,
Sure.
it's really strange.
And is that something you're preserving then? Jeff, the kind of 2-level porch, or are you talking about a porch that?
I'd like to keep it, I like that planter, I'd like to get rid of that, that's
Okay.
like, the, 60s, and
Sure.
that's not part of, I look at that as landscaping.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Agree.
and that's all cracked, it's been, water got in and cracked.
Mhm,
it.
sure.
So I don't think that, I think it makes the house look bad, actually.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree.
So we don't have any way of knowing what it originally looked like, railings versus the spindles versus pickets.
Yeah, other than, I'm guessing that half of the porch was probably the way it was. I mean, that's old, you know, before they put this porch on, or this railings, but
And in this 1980s picture, it appears that the right end of the porch has posts that go all the way to the driveway, or to,
Yeah, I think that's still there.
Okay.
too, Yeah.
and does that still be the case, or will you be changing that?
No, I'd like to keep all that the same.
Okay.
You know, I don't see, reinventing anything in the front. 'Cause I think
Okay.
the front house is nice, just the way it is.
Mhm.
It would be nice to see the original photo if they had one, to see if there was another railings up on top of the flat roof, or just be, interesting to see.
Is there anything older than this, or, I mean,
No.
this is the only?
without doing
this is
more
all we have.
research and, I mean, it's possible. If these people were prominent people, sometimes you can find them in old books, but
So you need motions on the railings and the egress window.
can we combine them into one motion, or is that, do we have to do it
You can.
individually? Pardon?
You can.
Yeah, certainly. I think
Well,
Jocelyn has-
I move to approve a application for a certificate of appropriateness as submitted per testimony for 75 West 12th for installation of an egress window and replacement of current railings. Based on Secretary of Interior Standard Number 9, new additions, exterior alterations, or related new constructions should not destroy historic materials that characterize the property, and that the new work shall be differentiated from old and shall be compatible with massing size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment.
And is there support?
Second.
Thank you, Nick. Any more discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? And carried.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Joe.
And
Have fun.
if it looks good underneath,
Wow.
you'll be the first one to know.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll be on the edge of our seats.
Yeah. Wish you the luck that I have.
And the
We kept peeking.
stick-to-itiveness that you
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
which I don't have.
Come up. Welcome. Hi.
Welcome. You guys have been patient.
Thank
Sorry
you.
it's
Sorry you had to.
Hi, Jody. How are you?
Good to see you.
long time-wise. Yeah, good to see you.
Peter, Joe Garrett.
We'll come get you.
Okay. I'm gonna take my paper.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay. We'll miss you, Nick. Beat it.
Yeah.
Okay, just give me a
Okay.
second. and
Yeah,
I'll-
yeah.
Yeah, let's put you, get some.
Okay, let me go through the photographs and then we
Mhm.
can take things one at a time. I think this is all intact. So there's, they want to do a basement renovation, which could possibly include a change in the exterior material from cement block, and I think the cement block is just on the front porch, and then it's a field stone, or it's a
Yeah.
Waverly stone, or some stone,
The
but
sandstone.
it's heavily covered
It's
with.
heavily
Heavily
covered, it's a
covered.
mess, yeah.
So, and talking about reinstalling basement windows where it looks like they've been infilled.
Yes.
A proposed rear deck, and we'll come to that in a minute. Proposed kitchen addition off the southeast corner.
Yeah, small one, yeah.
And changes to building elevations, there's a variety of those accommodating the kitchen addition. The windows, pair of windows on the second floor on the front side. And the northern elevation, the introduction of new French doors in that location. Replacement of an octagonal window with a rectangle,
Yes.
rectilinear, rectangle,
Rectilinear, oh, that's a
Linear,
nice
that's
one.
interesting.
Yeah.
and a new window in place of the vent on the gable. So So here's,
Original, yeah.
We don't know how
so
old
it was
that is.
built
85, 1885.
It was,
No.
the picture's not from
82 to
No.
85 somewhere.
1885, yeah.
But the picture itself, I don't know.
No, that
No,
was-
those were in the 70s, I think, when we did the original survey.
And interestingly, the one next door doesn't have its
No,
cupola,
the
does
cupola
it?
isn't
No,
there,
we-
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I'm told they found somewhere in the city and put it back
Really?
on. Yeah, it was gone for a generation
Used to
or
be
so.
one in the Capon House, and they took it down.
Something
I
about it
think.
that looks a little off, but
Uh-huh, yeah, yeah. I'm
that's
not-
another conversation.
That's right,
Weird.
yeah. Sure.
Okay.
All right.
So
By the way, I see Garrett Collin, he was a Hope College president, I think, Collin Hall.
He was?
Lived in that house, yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
in Collin
Colin.
Park.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Collin
in
Park,
this house,
yeah.
in this house,
Kind
yes.
of
Yeah, a lot
Huh.
of significance.
a man of everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the proposal for us, the meeting is just, it's gonna be a long process. We're thinking about investing a lot in this,
Mhm.
just, we want to start the discussion with you guys to keep in the historic, you know, character of the city and the location. So, because we want to invest a significant amount of our resources, want to be sure what is your first impressions, what are they?
Mhm.
And think to have a general scope of how far we can go, and then we'll decide to proceed or not. But probably there are no major components. I don't go too specific. Do you have the picture of the front? Because I think that's
The sketch
this one, the
version.
sketch
Yeah.
from
Mhm.
Nick. Yeah, that's basically the main changes that we're gonna see in the front of the house are related to the top baluster in the porch. And the window, originally we had a door there, as you can see in the
Mhm.
original picture. It was transformed to
I
that
can see
window. Our suggestion, if it would be possible, to change that for a French door to have access to that top porch. I mean, then the addition of a window on the side, right? That is
Oh my, it's
really
missing altogether, isn't it?
That was still there. That's
Wasn't there.
something
Do you think it was there? Or-
we don't know.
Okay,
No, we
So-
don't.
But it makes very good sense to us with the view and the
Mhm.
location.
sure.
It would just, yeah. good.
Yes, then the porch, will be talk about materials and all that stuff, because we want to change that a little bit. As we were talking about the condition in the side of the Waverly stone, it's very deteriorated, very patchy. You
Mhm.
can go there and see it.
Mhm.
And I mean, this is a very preliminary study. We'll have to go with materials and options.
Mhm.
But if that would be possible to replace that, then check the condition of it. And also adding windows that were there, just they have been covered.
So you'd put those windows back in?
We'd
Back
like
in.
to.
You'd like to, yeah.
Yes, there's one question about in the back. You want to talk about the back? We want to add a deck,
You wanna, yeah, scroll
if
up
that's
to the-
possible. So we go,
I think those are the reasons why we
yeah, this is the main.
Oh, there
Yeah,
you can
there's
see
the
that.
foundation,
Oh,
yeah.
that looks like more concrete than Waverly.
Just that.
Yeah.
It just, yeah, it's
It's
a
Been
mess.
kind of parge coated on and
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
Mhm. And then like
What?
windows are filled with cement or boarded up.
Okay.
Back towards the top, yeah.
And although locally Waverly Stone is so interesting, and just the
Yes.
idea that it came out of a quarry right here is
Right,
interesting.
right.
But every time I see it, when I'm standing up close to it, it looks like the surface is spalling off.
Very porous.
And then
yes.
is that next surface gonna spall? I mean, I'm not an expert on.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Did that one have the back?
Yeah, the first
There's a-
picture, yeah. All right.
No, that's not the-
Then the other change that we'll see probably will be the siding.
Mhm.
We're talking about maybe possibility of cement more, that is closer to the look of wood, has a
Mhm.
quality material.
Yeah,
which is
'cause-
historic.
We have accepted that in the past, and the important thing is that reveal, that amount of
Yeah,
reveal, so that it's historically.
right, right.
Right.
And the contractor themselves can control that, of course, when they're installing it, but
Yeah.
it's,
No, that would be fine.
What's that, right now, is it, I can't remember, is it vinyl sided or aluminum siding?
Aluminum siding.
And it's, when it's wider, right, than
Yes,
than
wider.
the
Really
original
ugly,
probably
that's all I
was,
can tell
yeah,
you.
the 4-inch versus the 2. Yeah.
It's-
and I notice, we were talking about, I forgot now, chalking, that vinyl, or I've not noticed it in vinyl, but I've certainly noticed it in
Aluminum, yeah.
aluminum siding. If you were to rub it, you would have that color on your hands, even though it's been standing there for 40 years or longer.
Mhm.
Yeah, I haven't tried it. I just know it's.
There is an illustration somewhere about the back porch.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Is it the first
Yeah,
one?
let's go to the
actually?
first
Oh,
picture,
yeah.
the first one. I think yes, here on top right.
Oh,
Right there
yeah,
it is.
that's-
Yeah, you
oh,
can
okay.
barely.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Maybe a little bit higher, we can just check the back side. Right, because this is the other component. We're thinking about expanding maybe this wall to here, 4 feet by 10, I think, something similar to that,
More or less.
to expand the kitchen.
Yours seems to
Yeah.
have that.
So it looks like you keep the roof line the same, and then where you expand it, you just
There's the
change the
possibility of
angle.
expanding here, we don't know, this is very preliminary,
Yeah.
I want to hear your opinions on that too. If we do this expansion, it would be just here forward.
So it'll be a slightly shallower roof pitch that would be continuous
Mhm.
with the roof above it.
Right.
Right.
So it collects ice and snow like ours does.
Oh, my God. Don't tell us that.
I'm just saying the shallow roof pitches have their.
Right.
Yeah.
And then this would be a deck in the backside, yes, you know, following
Yeah,
the same
this-
theme on the front with the stones.
Mhm.
Yeah, and remind me, Phil, decks, unless they're attached to the house, they don't really even need, or at least you could approve those, or they don't really need much.
Well,
Or,
yeah,
I
if,
shouldn't say, well, you say what it is.
yeah, I think the direction we're taking on it is if they're 18 inches or higher,
Mhm.
then.
Then it would be,
review them.
that we would want.
Well, there's a
okay.
change there, did you point, I mean, obviously the French doors
What
in the
is-
back, that's different than the face
Mhm.
of the back right now.
Oh,
And would this deck, as proposed, be roughly the level of the floor in the house, or would it be down a few steps? I think I'm seeing 2 steps there.
Is that what
couple
he's doing?
steps.
I would like it as
Yes.
close to the floor as possible,
Okay.
but I
Right.
don't know.
Right.
We're running into issues just with zoning. I mean, we probably would have, you know, like the
Or-
city itself,
Mm-hmm, yeah.
there's not a lot of land there, so we have to do
Uh,
what they,
Yeah, we're talking about the height.
Yeah, the height, but yeah, so.
But you do like the snow not to build up halfway up your French doors, and
No,
you
that's
like to have
true.
it down on the,
So, and
deck,
yeah,
yeah.
it looks like he has a little bit
Personally,
of a
yeah.
step.
yeah, that's a good, yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, height, I don't think would be an issue, whatever you suggest. I think
Yeah,
we'll be
yeah, we
o-
could
we'll
probably
be
go either
okay
way with that.
One more point related to this back. We go with the extension, or with, we were checking if it would be possible to do an egress window here for the basement. to moonlight. That'd be
Because we can't do it on the back of the house, because there'd be no purpose in it with the
Yeah.
deck. So if we could have it on the side, which you don't see from the road either.
And this side's a little too tight, isn't it?
Right.
that's where the.
Mhm. Well, it's where the
The
driveway
driveway
is.
is.
I mean, I guess we could, honestly, that one's less visible than the other
This,
side.
this would be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
we're keeping the garage.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, so you're, yeah, right about where you are, Phil, that's the egress window that you would propose, just
Yeah.
where this cursor
Yes,
is?
yes.
Okay,
Yes, this is 9th Street. This is
Mhm.
the house.
Yeah.
okay.
And then that side is the side with the, is it the Coates house? Yeah, the brick house is right
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
So you really can't see hardly.
You could climb
anything.
right into their basement window.
Right, we
Yeah,
could
that's
probably
right.
have a,
Oh, look how small that garage is, really.
It is.
Yeah.
I,
I
well,
remember-
originally I thought,
Yeah.
oh,
How
would it
big
be
is
nice
it?
to get rid of it, but we
Yeah.
can't, and it turns
No.
out with the zoning, we wouldn't
Sure.
even have room for a garage, so we're
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
all good.
that is really a big house on us.
So how big is the garage? If-
It's a one stop.
Oh,
ten-
yeah.
Was it 1, and is it deep
Yes,
enough for an
it's one.
actual?
Yeah, I think
Yes,
it's deep enough
yes,
for an actual
yes.
car.
Okay.
I know it's 12 by 12, something like
Mm.
that.
Wow.
I have, I actually do own a Model T, which is about 12 feet long.
Uh-huh.
And probably these
Was
garages
they
were
were-
about,
Right.
they just
Yeah.
thought, why would a car ever get
Right.
longer than 12
Right,
feet? And
right.
indeed they are.
Right.
Right.
I park a modern car in the garage, and I actually have to walk carefully behind it. And actually, when I bring it in, I touch the front wall. And
That's right, it's when I get
Then you
a,
know-
a
then
sports
you know
car
it's time to
hurries up here,
stop.
my baby.
That's right.
We do wanna change the door, which is not original
We'll see.
at all.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Roof.
one's, yeah.
When,
Well, the roof has to be done. that's-
Yes, yeah.
Phil has some guidelines on it. You mean the door to the garage?
It's not
Or-
original
Got
to,
it.
yeah,
Sure,
it's,
sure.
I think it's an aluminum door, to be honest,
Okay.
so we would
We
like
do have
to-
some design
Yeah.
guidelines that
Yeah.
are helpful.
Yeah,
Although, I will say this, I was surprised when I went through this process that there are 2 companies that do most of the garage doors here, and neither one of them was sure what was acceptable. And I thought, gee, you'd think they would know, being in the garage door business, but neither of them were, or they just weren't willing to say. But we're happy to help you with that.
So So if there's anything that jumps out, any considerations that we should take into account as we start the process.
I liked your idea for the field stones.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that would look really nice on
Mhm.
the house.
Mm-hmm.
Is replacing your old stone,
Right.
the Waverly stone. I think that would be nicer than cement blocks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I don't know the cost on that. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So in something like that, is the part below grade okay, and then you would just be building new stone on top of that, or would you be digging it all out? Or I'm just asking because
We're going to
we're
be
no experts.
finding
Yeah,
out
yeah.
where we're at, because
Yeah.
it is not a concrete poured foundation, it is.
Sure.
right stone, or,
Rubble.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
just-
They call
That's
it
what
rubble
I-
sometimes, which is really a disturbing word.
yeah, and I don't even know. I guess that's something you'll have
Well,
to
yeah,
discover,
so
is
we have to
because
figure that one out.
I can imagine it'd be easier to put field stone on top of some kind of stone thing that's already there than
Mm-hmm.
you know, cement. I mean, I don't know if you could even do cement block on top of a pile of stones. You know, that doesn't sound right to me. Or poured foundation or whatever. I don't know, Phil. Maybe you've had more experience with what people do in those situations to repair. I mean, if you're replacing, say, from 6 inches below grade to the, you know, the bottom of the sill, how was that done, you know, mechanically?
Well, we had more regular stone on our house
Mhm.
that was replaced. I mean, it had deteriorated.
Yeah,
And that they just took it down to good stone.
yeah, and then
built
build
it
back up.
And the front, I think this is a cement block on this
Mhm.
part of the
Yeah,
porch
it
now.
looks like,
So,
who knows what it
Yes.
you know,
was.
Yeah.
that's easy to say goodbye to, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right.
So you'd be thinking about the stone going all the way around.
Yes.
I mean, being a, or
Yes.
I think so, but
Yeah.
somebody did throw out, somebody who looked at, just one person who looked at it, and they said, since it is in such poor condition, could you do something like a stucco, or, you know, just something, and then do the field stone on the front and the back? Don't you remember that? They just thought it might be economically something we could think about. Ideally, yes, we would like to do the field stone, but we also have to think about, you know,
Yeah, the patching or the covering that was done on all of this
Yes.
is,
just ruins it,
is
yeah.
so inconsistent,
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
which I don't think is bad, it's just
Yeah.
inconsistent.
Mhm.
It maybe gives you a lot of flexibility in
Yeah.
how you replace things
Okay.
on that.
Great.
and-
So
and
that was
cover
this-
some and
yeah,
not
it-
others.
Good to hear. Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
yeah, I would say, and you know, now we're down to just a few of us here, but I feel
Yeah, camera.
like the the commission works pretty hard with people that are, you know, trying to look nice and just not throw cement block in there,
Right.
but that recognizing budgetary things, you know,
Yep.
Mhm.
Good.
we want a unit, you know, something that looks nice and appropriate, but there's certainly, I mean, I sent Phil a picture today of a place on 10th Street where the college had moved a house, or somebody had moved a house from the college campus, and they used a kind of a rough stone facing, I'm guessing a block, and, you know, it looks
Decorative,
nice.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just a,
Mm,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you
this
know,
is a
like that.
decorative product.
Yeah, like this kind of a thing,
Yeah.
and, you know, maybe that's
right.
less expensive
Right.
than,
Right.
you know, this is the actual house, and it's a
Okay.
little harder to see in this picture, but you can see the,
All right.
this is the house on 10th Street, not too far away.
Yeah.
And they, you know, it looks kind of stone-like, but
Yeah.
I'm sure it's easier to work with than whatever you have to do to have a regular mason. You know, those are,
Yes.
But that is a significant change from the stone that they've got.
yes, right,
So
and if you
yes.
can, right, it would look better than the cement encrusted stone, but whether I should say, I can't speak for the commission, but, you know,
That's
I
fair.
think working with something,
Yeah, those are the specifics when we go to it.
Yeah.
We'll develop the idea and
yeah.
what's your opinion. But in general, this concept looks okay to the commissioners?
It looks like some real
In general,
improvements.
I thought you had some really good ideas.
All right, all right, all right.
So, well, I know a few of you know us, but we do live in the historic district. We love the historic district, and it would be our home. So we
Sure.
want it to be
Mhm.
a nice home.
Sure.
Yeah, Nick's not here, so I can say this.
Yeah.
I think he did a beautiful job.
He did,
Yeah.
didn't he?
Yeah.
He's
Lots
been
of
really,
issues- Lots of
Guy-
issues to resolve.
Guy,
Yeah.
nice,
But
very
it's really-
nice,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, he's been really helpful.
Excellent, excellent.
It's been great.
And I do feel like the things that I'm seeing are things we've approved in other houses. I mean, that is some of the alterations to a porch or,
Mhm.
you know, even cutting a new space. I mean, those are all things that, you know, I think we've, I guess, allowed, you know, we've.
Mhm.
you know.
Is that generally true about the second floor porch? That's been we've done that before, or? I think you had some examples.
Well, I think he has
pictures.
samples, but the other point was, it's there already, it's just the railing
Okay.
would need to be there for us to use it. So
Sure.
I think Nick's idea was that, it's just bringing it to
Oh,
code.
there's one.
Okay, is it a rubber membrane roof, or,
Yes.
okay,
Yes, right now, yes.
but you can,
Yeah, cause it, I mean, it
And
was
would-
used that way.
depending on the height of the limestone piles, do you have a lake view?
We do actually,
Okay.
and then that added window, if we get that, actually gives
Sure.
us a
This one
really
here,
nice view
that's
from
the
inside
rail,
the
and
house.
that's the door.
But yes, we can totally see, we're
Great,
just a tiny, I mean, I know it's gonna
That's in to-
change,
in
or a
landscape.
tiny bit,
well,
Over.
right, but, and it changes with the length of the piles. I live on
Right.
Yeah.
Washington and
Okay,
12th, so
yeah.
I have the sense of it
Right.
is,
Yeah.
sometimes you
Right.
look and you say, wow, that pile
Right.
is huge.
Yeah.
It also lines up with the center of 8th, if you've ever noticed, if you're downtown, you
Oh.
look all of a sudden, right in the middle of
Oh, you
8th
can
Street.
see it.
You
Yeah,
see
that is really
Wow.
huge.
And sometimes it's striking how you think, well, you know, it's
Right.
obviously on its way down, but, you know.
You know, you kinda get excited and you think it's gone and then.
Uh-huh, no, it'll be
Is there-
back.
It'll be back.
And then a ship will come in.
And then
Then your
yeah.
ship comes in, right?
Yeah. We've talked briefly with the
And
neighbors, though.
you have,
Okay.
how often? The train right there too, sometimes.
Oh,
Yeah,
I-
just
We
went
hear it
by
at
the other
night,
day.
but-
Do you
I
really? I
actually,
didn't even realize.
It's,
Okay.
walked by and it was all of a
It's
sudden
not
the train
often,
was
and
walking
it's very
by.
slow. It's
In fact, it was right in
walking
front of
speed.
your
so-
house, looking at it, and the train went by.
I don't think I've ever noticed that.
So for them, the next step would be to actually come with more
Like-
specific plans and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
apply for the COA, right? Yep.
All right.
Okay.
I mean, if you're wrestling with some issues, you wanna bring them in, you know,
Mhm.
either to the commission or
Yeah.
to me.
Or to
you know, we
Phil,
can-
Yeah.
that's fine.
Excellent.
We can
thank you.
talk through them and
Sure.
Okay.
let's see, but.
That sounds good.
All right, this is
Great.
exciting.
We're very,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
very
an
pleased that you're
exciting
doing
Me
it.
project.
too,
yeah.
because I live right across from John there.
Okay.
I walk, that's like part of my walk.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yes,
And
yes.
I thought that there on Ninth Street, it would be really nice if that block just
Mm-hmm.
picked up a little more.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
One
was
at a time,
nice.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
no,
good,
we've had
great.
the house for a really long time, so we're
Yes.
excited
Mhm.
It's
to be
time.
able to.
It's done.
Well,
All right.
good
Thank you
luck
for,
and-
yeah, good luck with everything.
Great.
Keep
We
us-
may need a lot of
Oh,
it.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We understand. We've all been through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for.
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you for your patience.
If you see Nick out there, could you send him back in?
Yeah, would you please?
Thank you.
Tell him we burned him while he was gone.
Nick and Devin said, I can see you geeks going to the pencil museum, and then Nick said, yeah, we would too if we were there.
You rode out there by Fort Texas Road?
Yeah, we were just
Good.
right in the little town, and, you know, that's their story, and they're sticking with it, but they got a pencil museum. I guess it was more graphite than pencils, it was that they,
Well, it was more marketing than anything.
marketing,
Because it
right.
wasn't really, they didn't even do anything there except sell their name
yeah, really.
to the company store.
Okay. It's getting late, I want to cover a couple of little items at the end. But I want to run through this, what I've been pulling together on the design guidelines.
Great.
And this is basically, just to kind of warm you up, set you up for it, it's kind of a brain dump. I've been going through all of our design guidelines. I've gone through probably 20 or 30 different design guideline documents from other communities. I'm pulling what I can, which seems like the best parts of a variety of those together. I call this the first draft, but it's very early on in this. And I make a big note here on the front page that I'm stealing things pretty directly from other communities and,
Sure.
you know, trying to build this. So right now, it's not in one voice. You know, it's, and the formats vary somewhat. So there's that whole sort of layer of refinement on this, and just making sure that it does apply to Holland, you know, very
Yeah.
specifically, and even introducing graphics which aren't in it yet, and, you know, things that are immediately relevant to us.
Great.
So it's got a lot of work to do, but it's a big jump at this point. So the notion of this, I've called it a notebook. I call it a design guideline notebook. So it would, at least electronically and in the library and here, we could actually have the notebook. Otherwise, the intent is that things would be, you know, you could go to architectural detail, click on this, and that would take you to that page, and you could, you know, find whatever you want fairly quickly. It would also have a discussion about general preservation sorts of principles and guidelines and direction we're heading, the styles, architectural styles that we find specifically in Holland, and then the design guidelines and working within the districts. We've talked, the last few meetings, talked about the assignment of responsibility for review, and then they're paired up now with each of the design guidelines, so you'll see how that works together. I've taken the various items that we had, it was a long list. It's been compressed because if you're talking about doors and windows, the guidelines tend to be very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I've tried to merge those kinds of things, and it applies to a number of things. If you see this red X, that means there's a pretty good draft, initial draft of those together. So it really sort of alphabetical order, it follows the list that we had presented to you last time. And then roofs got very involved with a whole variety of aspects of roofs that even gets to the gutters and downspouts and dormers and, you know, things that really only happen on the roof. So that is kind of a collective bunch of things. I'm still working on siding. I think I added a skylight. No, I think I still got that to go, but anyway, you get the idea. And then there's a bunch of appendices. Preservation and ordinance, probably the ordinance is attached, something about the commission and how the commission functions, how we review proposed work in sort of a general description, and then what role these design guidelines play in all of that. So maybe some of this goes at the beginning, maybe it's better in the appendix. That's still to be worked through. Again, an appendix with the architectural styles, a listing of the designated properties, there's a glossary, references, those various guidebooks, guideline booklets that I looked at. The Secretary of Interior standards. There's also a standards and guidelines, that little green book that you've probably seen. That gets into a lot more detail than the Secretary standards do, and then the cultural landscapes piece. And that's a rather lengthy piece, out of which I've got to pull some things that just apply to those few things. But and then preservation briefs, that's something that's often forgotten, but I'll just jump to that for a second, maybe. Where am I? Yeah, that's all the way back here. You know, that really gets into a lot of detail on the kinds of things, you know, we get into conversations about every meeting. You know, the repair, these are booklet, I don't know if you've seen these. These are probably 20 or 30 page little booklets on all of those topics. So there's a lot of rich information. Really, Nick, I'm trying to respond in part to your question you've asked a few times. We just need a few key books and resources available. So part of the notion is try to integrate that into this in some way.
And each of those is a book? Is that what you're?
Each of those is, you know, it's, you know, it's comparable to that sort of a booklet that we have. So that's so there's discussion, purpose of the guidelines, the A, B, and C that we've talked about as who's responsible. And there's a general scope statement, just don't even try to read these. I mean,
Mhm.
I want to get
Okay.
this so that you can read these,
Yeah,
but
sure.
obviously. And then there are some things that are character defining features, and there's a general expectation throughout all of our reviews about what you do with those character defining features,
Mhm.
that there's special attention paid to those. You can be more flexible on the non-character defining features, but there are some sort of key statements. Doesn't mean you might violate one of these statements when you see it's appropriate or something's deteriorated, or there may be reasons to do that, and that's tried to spell that out. When you do look at this, if you see this name, that gives you a sense of where that came from.
Did you pull anything from Maine that you had written 30 years
No.
ago? We found a design
I tried to-
guideline that you wrote.
Yeah.
That was just
Oh,
floating around on
funny.
the internet.
If you see something in green, that means
$500.
it's really a question. Are we going to define minor, and how do we do that? But for example, architectural detail, there's a little bit of a statement, and then preserve significant stylistic and architectural features goes into a little narrative about that. This is probably an ideal length for one of these.
Okay.
Again, there's no illustrations in this, which
Mhm.
obviously extend the document to some degree. This, I looked at a lot of communities, but Steamboat
So we
Springs.
flew you out to Steamboat Springs, huh?
Yeah.
How about that?
Um,
By
So I went
internet.
through, this was a new one we hadn't talked about. I found it in a couple, so I
Nice.
thought I'd throw it in here. In my mind, this just, since it's new, this just applies to where the artwork is on the building itself. Doesn't apply to somebody putting a sculpture in the front yard.
Okay.
I mean, it's of limited application, but in some cases that artwork can be could be the way they treated the building, as a piece of art. I can think of one or two examples in Holland. Awnings and canopies, again, more communities and some local ones. If I've got Muskegon in here, I probably didn't borrow very much from them, because they're kind of a laissez-faire sort of set of guidelines. So I've got barrier and wheelchair access, a number of communities, decks and patios. This one gets a little longer because there's more elements. Well, when we get to porches, it gets really long.
Mhm.
Demolition and relocation, how you make decisions about demolition and how you make decisions about the relocation of structures, either coming in or allowing it to be moved out. Doors and windows, we ended up, you're putting those two together just ended up with a lot of these. So if you came in and were proposing some work, you ought to be able to find the nature of that work in this list.
Mhm.
And you'll know who reviews it, and then you'll know standards by which, what does repair mean, what does replace, and then this one, format-wise, I've got to get it more into a bulleted kind of a format. But there's a lot of information in this document. If you see it like this, with the shading behind it,
Mhm.
that's right out of Holland's
I see.
guidelines. So in some cases, I've just put it in whole cloth. In some cases, I've introduced some other language within it, and maybe even struck a
I
sentence or
think
two.
munchins is a real word. Why doesn't it like it? Doesn't like
I
them.
was just looking at
Yeah.
it to see why they're.
So,
So we've got energy efficiency, exterior lighting fixtures, fences and walls, flat concrete work. There isn't much to say on that. We don't review that for the most part.
mhm.
Garages and accessory structures. And sometimes they'll reference, like a garage and accessory structure references the wood section as well, because typically they're wood and they're sort of related issues. Masonry. A lot of subheadings in this.
Hmm.
And like I said, sometimes I've struck some sentences that we had in some of ours. Mechanical equipment's dealt with. New construction and additions, this gets kind of lengthy. And then I pulled in, again, this is ours, out of ours. We've actually got 2 different sets of guidelines in this topic, so I've got to work through that.
Why 2 sets, Phil?
I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah,
just do. Okay.
came across one, thought I was done, and then I found another one. So painting is in here, even to the point if you've got stylistically architectural styles, and this could be an appendix kind of thing too, but with certain architectural styles, there were general patterns of painting colors
That's
that were
important
used.
because there is a craftsman,
Yeah.
that duplex that's on Pine, that they painted like nautical blue, and it's really not
Yeah.
from that palette.
I think it's U of M blue.
It is.
It
I think
is.
It
you're
really
right,
is, because they had
yeah.
the
They have the
flower
yellow.
pots,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
yellow,
right.
I thought, really?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's an example of seemed to be,
It
always
is,
was a
yeah,
duplex,
it's,
what was built, duplex.
Because its mirror is really on 12th Street,
Mm-hmm.
further
Mhm.
down by
Mhm.
St. Francis.
Yes.
Yeah. So the photographs and diagrams that are predominantly going to be in this are photographs of houses that might have a note aside, similar to what we did in this document, probably using some of that. But also some diagrams about, what are the elements on a porch, and just so, everybody's talking the same, can refer to things the same way.
And I think we
It's really
make a big thing out of saying we don't deal with color, but it would be nicer if we were helpful to people in terms of color.
Yeah.
My memory of coming before you was that. I wish you would have helped me, and I would have worked out okay, but.
Yeah. And this starts out saying paint color is not regulated. Previously painted surfaces and new surfaces intended to be painted are not subject to review.
Okay.
But then it gets into the do not paints.
Mhm.
So it's a relatively short set, but I thought
But
this
you,
aspect of it.
somewhere else
was
you had
relevant.
something that suggest at least some,
Yeah. It gives you a sense of what historically has been appropriate. Doesn't mean you can't do something else or,
Sure.
but, so porches of.
We actually had enough paint flake off that when we turned it over, we could see the color on the back of it, so that appeared to be the first color, and we went with that.
Yeah, when I worked for a preservation architect, we did some, in downtown Philadelphia, there was a market, I forget what it was called, but a whole series on Market Street right by City Hall on the north side of the street, a series of buildings that was, I want to say Wanamaker's, but it might have been Gimbel's, or it was a big department store at one point, and that had gone out of business. But we took paint samples and mortar samples from that whole building, and the paint samples, you get a sample and you can see about 6 colors.
Yeah.
Where
That's
it's been
how we
painted
had when we
over time.
stripped our house to wood. It was, we had 6 or 7, 125 years, It's,
So lots of different pieces. This is porches. There's all kinds of elements on porches that are relevant. Part of the question in this, in addition to just voice, is how strictly do you want to regulate things? And the guidelines I looked at, some were very strict. Muskegon was very loose, and there's everything in between. So as this gets refined and sorted out, just want to make sure we're not going overboard.
I think there's a way to be really robust but still have lots of flexibility, so that if you pick it up and want to study some like porch anatomy, you can, and commissioners probably benefit from that more than anybody. But then at the end of the day, it's still up to human beings for each case by case rather than.
Yeah. So roofs, again, this is one of the longer ones. There's a lot of elements to this. Different types of gutters. We've talked about those in the last meeting or two. Satellite dishes. This is actually one of the guidelines we have. Siding is another one with a lot of elements to it. But we have, again, all the gray is what we've already got. So wood. question is commercial guidelines, whether we even want to get into this. If we want to talk about something going on 8th Street, we need to have a sense of this stuff. But whether it falls in this or it's an appendix, it's a different document or sometime down the road. I don't know.
It would be nice if we went through this and if we had any discoveries, we could feed that back on the UDO before it's done.
Yeah.
So it's not disjointed from the UDO. And
Yeah.
like the bank branch thing, I have a hunch there's other things out there that aren't covered right now by the UDO.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
don't know if timing will work out that way.
Yeah. And even guidelines for streetscape. What's in the right of way? What's the city doing with curb strips and trees and all of the stuff that goes into that public area.
New signage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then you get into the appendices, and I haven't developed much of that other than long glossary.
It's a lot
So-
of work, Phil.
Yeah, it really
Yeah,
is.
goodness.
I'm impressed
Yeah.
and
Awestruck.
Well,
and struck all at once that there are so many things. Who is the principal reader of this when it's done? Would-
I think there's a couple different groups.
Okay.
I mean, I think staff and the commission
Mhm.
is one set of readers. I think somebody wanting to do something on their house is
That's
another
what I'm
set.
thinking. This could be online,
Yeah.
a person could,
Yeah,
and
that's
if we get around to doing something with a realtor who has listed a house in the district,
Yeah.
maybe we could reference this online.
Sure.
Please go to this if you want, more.
Yeah.
I'd like to say we're here to help you with this process, and I feel like we are, but I realize we look like we're here to stop you from doing things, and that's not our
Yeah.
intention, and it's not.
Well, and if I'm Joe Blow on the street and I want to replace a door, and I handed you this book,
Yeah.
you'd turn around and go walk out the door.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's
I
got to
think
be
we have to-
accessible.
Right, that's because we have to speak to the person who does want to know this level of.
And they're out there.
And they're out there, absolutely, but that's not everybody, and I'm sure.
But I think it's great because you can pick up any book, but there's not one that's Holland specific.
Right,
And this
yeah,
is
this is
Holland.
Holland,
Yeah.
this is us. I
But
think
it
it's
needs,
great.
needs to be more of that. So that's,
Right.
when I get this in a place where you can connect to it, it's that kind of input that is going to be really valuable to this. It doesn't sound like us, or we don't have this example, or anything you spot in this will be helpful.
And is your vision that there would be lots of illustrations or
Yeah.
sample photographs or?
Yep.
Great.
But you look how long it is, I don't know how many pages this is, but you start putting that in, and
Yeah, well.
it just exacerbates the scale of the thing.
Yeah, sure.
So whether this then breaks down into 3 or 4 documents, or how it ultimately is assembled and presented is part of the
Okay.
question. But here's an idea of the different communities that Tampa, Falls Church, Rapid City, Oak Park and Illinois, Boulder, Steamboat Springs, Winchester, Virginia, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo's in here, Ann Arbor, Sandusky even.
I just
Covington.
returned from Williamsburg, and it strikes me, I'm glad we aren't Williamsburg, and I'm glad we aren't Oak Park, Illinois, where I would think the focus is this one particular
Yeah.
designer
Yeah.
who's beloved and all that, but to have to work around that would be, and to work around in Williamsburg, they're talking about a literally a year of 1775 and 6, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, in some ways, it's easier because they can say, well, this didn't exist till 2 years later, so forget it, we can't have it. On the other hand, there's a Disney aspect to it that says it's got to be, cities don't exist in 1 year, they exist over time. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to be us and not them.
Well, and part of this is working in the period of significance sort of notion into all of this. Because you're right, even some of the guidelines, if you look through them, Oak Park may be heavy on one thing. Westchester Borough, I don't know if anybody's been to Westchester, Pennsylvania, but it's a beautiful revolutionary, just post-revolutionary community. Everything's brick. I mean, it's beautiful. But what if that applies? You know, and I mean, I didn't. So I've tried to take what's good out of those. Then you got the Secretary of Interior, the 10 that we've got. You've got the cultural landscapes, which I will just blow through because it's quite long. But this is really directly out of their standards or guidelines.
That's great work for.
And then I guess this is the last piece, was the reservation briefs. National Park Service. So, it's like I said, I'm trying to get everything into this, and then I'm trying to see how it fits together and what makes sense and if it's
Harmonized.
too much. I mean, you could say, well, you know, this, if we just added a section on garage doors and roof lines, we'd be fine. Okay, I mean, if I'm not trying to convince you this is the right way to do it. I just want to make sure we've got something useful.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've seen all of this sort of in one place, which to me as a staff person is helpful.
Sure.
Yes, it is.
But
Yeah, great.
And I think that if a person is new to or surprised by the historic district, it's useful to have this resource. I think I would have been better off if I had visited something like this before coming in.
well, I could imagine if I wanted to replace my windows, I'd go to the Windows section to see what that said. That Windows section would also have a link down here to this repair of historic window. So there'd be a way that you can get to the meat that you're looking for without trying to wade through this, because if you try to wade through it, you'll get.
I think for people in my generation who want to be involved in this or want to have a historic house, it's really hard to know where to go to for this. So I think this will be really helpful for younger families in the district who actually are really into it but just don't know how to explore it. Same with contractors or people who want to get into a given trade. You know, the contractor doesn't have to always be opposed to all of this. They could be a geek about it and really love it too.
Yeah. Well, it'd be nice, you know, I know Jay Peters was giving something pretty, he didn't show up. He said he was coming. He was getting into Windows and really excited about maybe starting a business and restoring Windows. I think, you know, if people see this and see the material on Windows, you start to think, yeah, there is something significant to that. And somebody like Jay or somebody that is in the business, I mean, this could be very supportive of the trades as well.
Right. And the local trades.
Yeah.
You know, there's things that we have here with recalling the Dutch masonry traditions and things that are kind of like the Bennett Clausen story is really a local thing, but
Yeah.
it is a trade that could be cultivated.
So I'm hoping within 2 weeks
Great.
I'll be able to send you a link to the document, and then I'll just ask you to start wading into it and see how it sounds to you, see where it seems consistent or not,
Okay, great.
relevant or not, and what it could use.
Great.
Just
Okay.
a couple of quick updates. City Greenhouse on the 13th and 14th. I hope you've received a notice. You have, okay. That went out.
I
Yep.
think so.
So
I got it, but I didn't know where all it went. Okay, so we've got that day and a half workshop on the greenhouse. Nick and Kim are Historic District Commission's representatives there. That doesn't mean you're not allowed to come. We hope you all do. We hope everybody comes and gets involved in the evening session. And then if you have a chance to stop by during lunch or whatever you're doing on Friday, see what's going on and weigh in as you see things happening.
And it's February?
It's February 13th and 14th.
Okay.
So you can go out for your Valentine's dinner right after you come see us.
Well, that's sweeter than City Greenhouse.
So Har Yi Khan is providing services for us and is part of this. GMB Architects are also part of this. And they're both in the process of putting together some materials in advance so that we're ready and can work with everybody at that evening open house. And then we'll be working all day Friday. CLG partnership, community partnership, I made that submission yesterday. It was a submission for, I didn't bring a map for that. It's actually 3 areas, historic, around the historic district. We talked about them before, but just it covers this little piece in here that's missing. It's not designated and not really part of downtown. And then it's an area over here and an area in here, basically down to 16th Street. So it's a reconnaissance level survey, which is general, pretty general. I think we've got maybe a 50-50 shot that they'll like it. And that is because back in '88, that book that you've seen, that thick book, was a reconnaissance level of downtown and this whole area. So we've got some basic information. We've got that book. We don't have the photographs that went with it. We don't have supporting field notes that went with it. So it's, we've got kind of part of a previous project that the Bureau of History supported.
Mm-hmm.
So whether they're willing to come back and support it again,
yeah.
and whether their vision of a reconnaissance level survey will allow them to add more than what they did in that first round, because the first round, to me, it was a pretty superficial look.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got dates on buildings, and we've got a lot of information about properties, but if they're willing to entertain that, we might be a quick project for them, and they can sort of boost that effort for us.
And do they have staff that they would commit to it, or what would be our?
Our role is, it's easier understanding our role.
Okay.
They're doing the project,
Okay.
and our role is for staff, and they say 1 board member, but probably 1 or 2 board members, or as many as we could get.
Mm-hmm.
Their intention in this process is that they're helping us learn how to do these surveys.
Okay.
So they want to instruct and us working with them as they do the work. They'll produce it, they'll put the document together, we'll have to reproduce it in some manner, and circulate it and so forth.
Okay.
Doesn't cost us anything other than the time that we end up committing to it. So that went in. Non-contributing properties, I'll save this again, save it for another meeting, but what I'd like to do with that is just get a good series of photographs of those properties and just sit around the table and do it from here. It just makes some
That's
decisions.
more efficient than a bus, you think?
Yeah.
I suppose it is.
Yeah. And you'll have the addresses, so if you wanted to go out and see it beforehand or after, you could do that too. I think there's three factors. I think the date of the construction was 1. I think integrity of the building was 2, and then are there other aspects of significance of the properties that are still intact?
So would we take several photos, or one angled shot, or what do you?
Well, certainly front views of all of those.
Okay.
There's about 30 of them.
Okay.
That's
30.
that's
All
how I
right,
counted
good
them.
to know.
There's about 30.
All right.
So
I wouldn't oppose driving around. I feel like I would learn more than I would at looking at photos. I mean, it's extra time.
You and I can drive around. And
All right.
well, you do see the
I kind
context.
of want
better.
Nick there, if you
Oh,
want
yeah.
the truth, because I think there's a lot of. Okay, that's fine.
Well,
That's.
I mean, if that's
I'm
the
open
general
to
feeling.
Go
that.
around.
Okay.
We can, well, if we get enough people, then we have to.
Oh, yeah, if we have too many, we have a quorum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a constructive quorum. If one car goes that way and the other car goes that way,
Oh,
I mean, you end up doing the same thing.
It's like, yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm interested in that because I think, I work as an appraiser. A younger appraiser looks at something and says, "Oh, look at that old house, and that old house is younger than me." So I say, "No, it's not an old house because it's not older than me. It has to be older than me, right?" So anyway, there's just ways to look at things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if the weather
I'd like, yeah,
holds.
yeah. If we're never going to get winter, we might as
Yeah.
well.
we can do that.
Anything else, Phil?
That's it.
Okay. Who would like to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Phil.